Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another anime review. As for this anime review, I'll be covering episodes 3 and 4 of Pluto by Naoki Urasawa and Osamu Tezuka. And I'll just give the synopsis for both of the episodes before moving into my notes. For episode 3, we have Abdullah gets summoned by the police, Superintendent Tawashi, regarding Tazaki's murder. Basically a murder of someone who was murdered that's also a human. Geshit starts to suspect that his data may be compromised. And moving into episode 4, we have one of the professors, Okanomanizu, forgive me if I butchered that, brings a battered robot home in an attempt to fix it soon after a mysterious man claiming to be the owner visits his house. So now it's time to move into my written information regarding this review. So moving into Act 1, or we've got Act 1 and Act 2 covered as to how I'll be reviewing this. And Act 1 and Act 2 of the episode 3 starting now. So as the beginning of this episode begins, we have wild animals that have escaped their transport. As a child is seen in distress, we see a robot by the name of Uran enters the picture as she goes to calm the wild cats down. In this case, the wild cats consuming of a lion, a tiger, and basically a lioness. That's what we get to see on the screen. Upon that, she gets picked up, taken to the station, and not long after that, we end up meeting up with the Professor Abdullah, who ends up dropping into the station. And whilst this is occurring, Atom also goes to collect Uran at the station. A discussion goes about between human and robots between the two, which is really interesting. Geshit and his wife start to make arrangements to travel to Japan, only to learn in the events that they have sort of like made traveling plans to go to Japan once before, but it's sort of like not quite remembered in their memories. So there's the question of like false memories in robots, which is a really good discussion. We move into basically the next victim, who happens to die in Japan, and of course horns are left at the scene, and it's also believed to sort of be a copycat murder. So whilst making plans with his wife, or Geshit makes his plans with his wife, they do remember they do reflect on one of their last trips, which was in Europe. Geshit is then later interviewed on TV, to which they talk about basically the ammunition he uses. Moving into Act 2, we have the appearance of Epsilon. As he makes his appearance, he meets up with Hercules between the spot which the sort of like one of the robot corpses was at, and through that we end up getting into the character's life of Adolfo Haas, and we learn how he became a member sort of like of the anti-robot movement. We see more happening in regards to the character of Epsilon, and he has a bit of a discussion, and we talk a little bit more in regards to talk a little bit more about the characters of Brando and North. Of course, we return back to Atom and Uran, as they have a bit of a talk too, in regards to a stranger that they saw earlier, as they were a little bit unsure as to if the character was actually a robot or not, because they seem so lifelike, that maybe they weren't exactly what they appear to be. And this conversation is about the character of Abdullah. We then have Abdullah basically looking for Pluto. So, in other words, what's happening with the character of Pluto, who is sort of like the main antagonist. As the story advances, we end up seeing Uran move into sort of like helping a bit of a stranger out, and we learn that this stranger ends up having a bit of a ghosting type situation where they're operating under someone else's sort of like memory chip, but not the main character's memory chip for their body. And we learn that the actual character's memory chip, it belongs, or the actual corpse of this particular robot belongs to a construction robot who is looking for his body. We then learn at the end of this episode that the creator of Pluto now wants Atom to be killed, which moves us into episode 4 and the first act of 29 minutes. Moving into episode 4, we have the Professor Okamatsu, who was brought up earlier. He brings a robot dog into his household, which he finds, and in the process, he also has like a robot that protects him by the name of Yujiro. Something soon later happens in regards to the character of Yujiro as he gets killed, and we learn that Uran is also doing things as well. She's, due to the situations, the professor has also contacted his grandson, and there's a warning of a tornado coming in by, and in the process with this particular tornado, he is basically being given the orders. Well, it sort of changed a little bit different compared to the manga here, but that's not to say it hasn't ruined the story. To which we have Uran going to help save the professor's grandson, and also his mother, of course, being his daughter. And this is the episode to which we do actually see the death of Atom. So moving directly into Act 2, as we get to see a little bit more with the character of Adolf Haas, due to some unforeseen circumstances. He is now under the protection of Gashit, and they have the anti-robot league or anti-robot like cult that's in this universe. Of course, they don't like robots. They now start to see Adolf Haas as a bit of a threat, to which, yes, in a case, they do end up using a robot of sorts to sort of target him, to remind him to do his job. We also learn that Adolf Haas has some important information, to which Gashit connects to basically some of the human murders that are happening around the world, and that revolves back around to sort of like one of the former leaders of one of the nations that are in this story, and the character's name is called Darius. And the names that he mentions, one of the names that he does mention is also a professor who sort of like looks over the maintenance of Gashit himself, to which in turn we get to see Epsilon go out of his way to save Professor Hoffman from an explosion. And with that, we see Professor Hoffman in a discussion with Hercules, also wanting to learn a little bit more about his own creator, and also how Dr. Tenma also plays a important role as well in the story. Of course, news eventually hits around the world of the death of Atom, and yes, it reaches Gashit and his wife, and also what we are yet to expect to see, maybe a little bit later on. I cannot give any spoilers, even though I have read through the manga twice. I will now jump into the area of my afterthoughts in relation to these two episodes. So, moving into, say, the first part of the story, I quite enjoyed the animation and where they took things from the previous episodes. They are making sure that there is a lot of consistency between both the manga as well as the anime which they're bringing to screen. I can understand some of the people's criticism in regards to how the series has been like completely dropped, but you got to understand that we are basically seeing each or volumes 1 to 8 of the manga, but in single episodes. And I can understand why people might be a little bit hesitant with it, but definitely check this series out, especially if you might happen to be someone who has watched the Astro Boy series or even read through the Astro Boy manga. I'll say one thing, after reading through the Pluto manga, I definitely want to go out of my way to pick up the original Astro Boy manga. In regards to the characters, I think it was really well done in regards to sort of like seeing the introduction and also the discussion happening around Uran. I still really would like to add just a small bit of criticism, and this is the only bit of criticism that I have, is that I really think they had the opportunity here to sort of like show how Uran was able to sense fear, and the way it was sort of brought across, I really think it could have been done better. Like, you could have shown it as a bit of a pulse of sorts to how she receives it in her own basically robot encoding. That's the only thing that I'd want to bring up in regards to the character of Uran. Apart from that, I really enjoyed the scenes that she was in. Even when she was talking to the stranger, her interactions with Atom, even though she's sort of like a bit of a new character, but she will play another somewhat major, a mix between a main character role and a supportive character role later on, as we see in both the manga and also this series. So, moving into the next thing, and that is the rating of the characters. For the main characters, I give an 8 out of 10. For the supporting characters, I give an 8 out of 10. Really enjoying the animation in this, an 8 out of 10. And along with this animation, I cannot forget the soundtrack that is being used here. I don't know what music is being used sort of like in relation to the character of Gashit, but it really suits it when you see this character work or walk into a scene, and it's just a few notes that you just pick up in it, and it's just with those few notes that when you hear it, you know that he's about to move into something that is important involving the work that he does. Especially when it comes to the death of the robots as well as the death of the humans. Whilst he's been investigating the robot deaths, he's now been sort of like put in charge of now protecting a human that's anti-robot. And also making sure that his family is also kept safe at the same time. So, 8 out of 10 for the soundtrack. Last but not least is the story rating. How well do I think that this story is coming across if I were to compare it from the manga into the anime? I think they've done a pretty decent job. Like I said, these ratings are subject to change And for all I know, they could end up changing towards the end on maybe the last 2 episodes. I don't know. Where it's an 8 out of 10 for today, it might change at the overall rating point, which, okay, maybe I did rate that too high, maybe I rated it too low. So until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. Stay tuned for the next video covering episodes 5 and 6. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. And what episodes have you been enjoying so far of Pluto?